All right. Good afternoon, everyone. Dave Carter with Flower Hill Institute, along with Chris Roper. And we'll wait just a second. We always have a minute of awkward silence here while we let everybody get in from the waiting room. So we'll wait just a second before we get started. All right. I think we're getting most of the folks in here. So we'll go ahead and get underway. Like I say, I'm Dave Carter with Flower Hill Institute, along with Chris Roper. And we're really pleased today to have a couple of folks on here that have got a ton of experience in workforce development and education in the meat processing industry. So we look forward to having a great conversation here for the next hour. Just a few housekeeping issues before we get started. Number one is this is being recorded. We always record these roundtables and put them onto our website so you can download them or refer them to a friend to download. We want you to ask questions as we go forward. So be sure and do that in the Q&A and not the chat, because we'll be watching the Q&A as we go along here, and we'll be passing those along to us. And then you will be getting a two-question survey immediately after this roundtable. And real quickly, we just want to know your thoughts on how we did today and how can we improve it. And then number two, what topics would you like to see us cover in future roundtables? So Chris and I are trying to do one or two of these a month, and we're always looking for something that's of interest uh, to smaller processors. Um, so as I said today, we've got two folks with a lot of experience here. Um, I've known both of these gentlemen for quite some time, and looking forward to what they're going to have to say. So I'm going to allow them to introduce themselves. And Dr. Renfro, you're on camera on my computer, so go ahead and start. Yeah.
Okay. Well, I'm Greg Renfro. I'm the extension meat specialist here at the University of Kentucky. I started in the meats industry way back in 1989 as a retail meat cutter, and what was supposed to be an after-school job turned into a career. I earned my bachelor's and master's at the University of Illinois and my PhD at University of Missouri. I've been here at UK for 20 years.
Good. And Dr. Maddock.
Yeah, so Rob Maddock with the American Meat Science Association, where I serve as the technical assistance officer. Prior to my work with AMSA, I was a professor at North Dakota State University for quite a while, where I taught classes in meat processing, food safety, and things like carcass evaluation. I've been with this job for a few years now, helping out folks like are watching this who have some needs for some assistance as they expand and improve and start new meat processing operations.
Great. Chris, anything we need to cover before we jump into it?
Just really want to appreciate everyone that's joining us today, and I see folks that have joined us from all over the United States, including our friends down in Puerto Rico. So thank you all for taking time to be with us. And our panelists just know we're nationwide today. So we've got folks from all over the United States here. So appreciate you all.
Yep, absolutely. So first of all, we pulled you guys in just because of so much of the work that you're doing through your own organizations and institutions. And Dr. Maddock, yeah, explain a little bit of some of the programs that American Meat Sciences offers on an ongoing basis.
So we American Meat Science, just as it sounds, we're an organization of scientists. We're the people that work at the universities and colleges and in the industry, advancing the knowledge of meat. Dr. Renfro was a meat scientist. That's what he works in as well. So we do research, we do programming, and do those educational programs. So at AMSA, or American Meat Science Association, we have several things we do. We have some certificates that are offered through the online education platform ICEV. So we have food safety certifications, we have meat judging certifications, and we're working on some additional ones as well. But those would mostly be applicable to kids in high school. Maybe Occasionally, those do bleed over into a junior college or community college curriculums. In addition, we have some hands-on or some in-person classes that are designed to advance knowledge professionals. Our two kind of primary ones are Pork 101, typically held at universities such as Nebraska. We've been at Penn State, Texas A&M, kind of move around the country. I believe we're in Nebraska again this year. We learn about a lot about how to improve the value in the pork production chain. And then we have Poultry 101 and Poultry 201, super great programs, typically at Arkansas. The 201s do move around a little bit, where you learn everything you need to know about processing and how to ensure the quality, the value of poultry processing, down to batter and breading and cutting and portioning as well. So those are our primary things. And then we also have some online trainings that we are working on. We've got one on business that we're kind of proud of that we'd like some more people to take. We're working on packaging, and then we're working on some quality assurance programs as well. All those would be available if we just meatscience.org, get hold of me as those things start to come online. But we do have a fair amount of education that we work on our end in support of people like Greg at universities as well.
Dr. Renfro, yeah, it's, I guess, about 20 years ago that I started tuning into some of your work and some of the stuff that you have online. I've shared your YouTubes very widely there. But yeah, explain
Yeah.
some of the programs that you've got there through University of Kentucky.
Yeah, sure. Here at UK, we have three meat scientists. I do all the extension work, so I'm the guy that takes the science to the masses, so to speak. Yesterday and Monday, I was working on one of our big youth programs we have, which is the 4-H Country Ham Project, which to a lot of folks may not know what a country ham is. And they'd be shocked to find out that a lot of those hams sit out at room temperature for long periods of time. That's one of my marquee projects. Another one that we have is called the Food Systems Innovation Center. Like a lot of states, the local food movement is a huge thing. And one of the things we do with our Food Systems Innovation Centers work with those local food entrepreneurs, knowing full well that, if something goes amiss, if somebody gets hurt from consuming one of those foods because somebody does it that where it's not safe, they may not understand it, it's not safe, that they could really set the Kentucky Proud program back a while. So we work with those. One of the things I'm proud of, and it goes back to what Dave was talking about with the videos. We have a meat cutting school here at UK. We've done it for about 18, 19 years now. It evolved from working with a major retailer here in the state, training their meat cutters, to now we do 3-day workshops where we get folks on the kill floor on the morning, and then the afternoon we spend in the classroom learning about food safety, learning why meat is red, pork is pink, what makes things tender, what affects all that, why is fat important in pork and things like that. Then the next day we spend all day in the cutting room, hands-on training. We do that now. I have to put the caveat out there that normally we start those programs in the late spring throughout the summer. We're moving those to the fall this year because we are currently building a new meats lab. And when we would do those programs was about time we start to move to the new meats lab. So, and then we kind of thought people would be a little upset that, hey, I took this class in the old meats lab and now you got this brand new shiny penny that we want to see. So we're gonna do those in the fall as well. Like Rob said, I teach a class called ASC 300, which is meat science, and that's where we get the kids in the classroom. We talk about all things that revolve around meat, from growth and development all the way to hot dogs, and we get them down to the meats lab and they get some hands-on training.
Very good. And I know when we were having the conversation to kind of plan this, you mentioned that both of you are kind of plugged into programs all across the country. So, any of you that are listening, if you want to put something into the Q&A about where's something in Iowa or Washington State or whatever, yeah, we'll test their knowledge here. So
Might be a good time to give Rob, Dr. Maddox's website, the Meat Locker, a good plug. That's a website that we reference a lot of times when people want to know where training and various resources are at. But the Meat Locker website that the American Meat Science Association set up a little over a year ago now, they keep a very good training directory of what colleges and institutions are having trainings usually throughout the year, right, Rob? I mean, they're all over the country. So you guys do a great job of keeping that up to date and keeping resources there on that website.
Yep, absolutely. And we've already had a question come in here, Chris, from Arthur. What suggestions are there for a startup poultry processing unit, small or regional, to do it profitably and still be affordable for the consumers?
Rob, are you gonna take this one? You kind of look like you're like a barrel racing horse ready to come out of the gate.
Yeah, no, that's a great that's probably the question, right? I think on that too is how you get started in that. It's probably that's a longer discussion that we do with that. I will say the as you get started in and honestly Chris and Dave too are great at these things too. You gotta have some planning, right? You gotta have a business plan and to start with to lay it out. Does this even make sense? I don't, you don't need a full blown feasibility study. You probably don't need to spend tens of thousands of dollars. But I think for your local area, you need to throw some planning together. Say, here's what we're trying to accomplish. You can gather up a lot of costs, know about things like what's your construction cost, what you need for equipment, what's the availability of the markets. You can do that a lot on your own in your spare time if you got other full time jobs or if you're trying to expand. But the planning is definitely the place to start. And then if you roll into this idea, where can I find people that can do that work? That gets a little that kind of speaks to that. That's well, we can maybe expand on some of those things. It depends what you're trying to accomplish, whether you're making value added products or you're going to do some custom work, or you're going to slaughter and process birds. um, a lot of those things have to be done organically, and we'll get to that, I think, as we continue to talk. But I'll let these other guys chime in on these startups too, because that's a pretty big question.
Yeah,
Yeah, it's huge. We have a challenge in Kentucky where we have some poultry processors. They don't always run all the time, I don't know about other parts of the country. Sometimes it seems like it's a little seasonal, which makes the consistency and the profitability a bit of a challenge. And that's where you probably need to look at diversifying. I have a couple meat processors that do red meat, but then they also have a poultry line as well.
Yeah, I would add to that as well. And regionally, there are different challenges. And as you in some of the northern states that Dave and I work in, where there's a lot of cold weather they deal with, and they only have 6 months or so out of the year that they can deal. One, they've got to grow the birds and process them in this time frame. So they have some different challenges than what you might have down in Georgia, Louisiana. Some of your southern states. So, and Arthur, we're happy to dive into your project specifically as well if you want to
absolutely.
reach out, because that is a big question. And we would want to look at your local regulations. Some states are more friendly to poultry operations than others. So we want to obviously look at some of your local jurisdictions to see what challenges you might face. And we've even had plants that opt to move to another county, or even across maybe state lines, if they have more favorable rules to comply with. So it's very complex, and there's not a one size fits all answer to your question, Arthur. So but hopefully all the various data can help you a little bit.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So when it comes to the training side of things, guys, I know Chris and I deal with some processors, and they're thinking that if they could find a good workforce training program, that they'll have people coming into their plant that are plug and play, ready to go. And we talked about that the other day. So, to talk a little bit about what it takes to finish the product once they've gone through a training program.
Yeah, everybody wants that, like you said, plug and play, the seamless fit, however, verbiage you want to use there. That's a challenge. we have programs where we train folks, like I've done a few trainings over the years, several trainings, and I know the American Meat Science Association and Rob, they know other schools that are doing this kind of stuff as well. Experience is the true teacher. That's why we went back to just kind of showing the basics, because we know that, the only way you really master this is you get in there and do it every single day. And I jokingly say that, when I turned 50, I decided I needed a midlife crisis, and I can't afford a Corvette, even though they're made here in Kentucky. And so I decided to learn guitar. And you notice after 4 years, I'm still here teaching people how to cut meat and not on tour with Metallica, because I don't put the effort into it that I should, to master it. And that's the same thing with meat cutting. And even, somebody like me who's been doing this for 37 years, if you said, "Hey, come work for me," it would still take me a couple weeks to kind of learn the lay of the land of what you're looking for, what you're wanting, what your customers want, even to know where do I find trays, where do I find vacuum bags, and so on and so forth. So it's still, even those plug and play guys are, it still takes them a couple weeks to a month to kind of get the feel of the lay of the land. What do you think, Rob?
Jump on that too. So, previously to this, I was at North Dakota State University. We actually set up a meat training. We got some USDA dollars for workforce development. We set up a training with the local community college, or not local, down about 60 miles, which is local in North Dakota. Um, and we ran some people through, and the idea being that they would spend this semester doing some classroom stuff. That was the requirement to get a certificate from the state of North Dakota. They would spend about a half a semester in the NDSU meat lab, where we could show them one of everything. They could help slaughter beef once and pig once and lambs once. And we'd cut up a side of beef or two and process a pig and process a lamb and make some brats and some hams and bacons. But at the end of 10 weeks, then they would go out and do another 10-week internship, whether it was at a processor. And most of the people went through that. They ended up with a small processor. A couple of them ended up in retail. And of course, when we talked to those processors, they were thrilled. One is they got some people who wanted to work in the industry, and they came in with just enough nice skill so that they could be said, "All right, let's go." But again, the training was, they still needed a lot, and they're probably several months away from being able to take something over. A couple other things to add to that. People ask about our students all the time when it's an NDCU. They probably ask about Greg's students, about students from Minnesota, South Dakota, Kansas State, Texas A&M, wherever. Um, Depending on those kids, if they come out with an animal science degree that maybe has a meat science emphasis, they got some skills, but we don't see a lot of those students end up in smaller processors. Because they're probably looking for professional or corporate jobs, or they're maybe starting some of their own businesses. If you do get an opportunity, like Greg said, they're building a brand new meat lab at Kentucky. If you find a kid who's worked in the meat lab for 2 or 3 years, they are pretty close to
Yeah.
fully. I mean, they can do just about anything. They got real good education, far which that exceeds what they get in the classroom. So some of our grads are great, and some of they'll work good for you. They know a lot of stuff, but they maybe aren't really good on the floor yet. And but you got some kids. We get a lot of kids work through the meat labs at the larger state colleges and universities. If you can find those kids that work for you, that's a really good place to start looking for some people. But you're fighting one of the deals, right? You're fighting with the large processors, the regional guys. A lot of those kids are looking at Cargill or places like that for
Yeah.
jobs. So just that's one of the things is workforce. You can find the kids, but for young people. A lot of times they're going to be expensive. Probably you have to. They're going to be weighing the JBSs of the world, or the Smithfield Foods, versus what you can pay them. The other, just not to dominate this, is those community college training places that are actually training meat cutters. That's probably a little different. They're probably expecting to work in a smaller facility. Unfortunately, we lost a lot of those. Some of them come back, and Flower Hills put together a nice list of those that I'm sure that they have available. But we lost a lot of those meat cutting schools, probably in the 70s, 80s, and early 90s.
Yeah.
Up here, everybody went to Pipestone, and you were in the northern. That was their meat cutting school. That thing's been closed for quite a while. I think there's been some some effort to get those going again. But just some ideas. University kids, yeah, are great if you can get them. Some of those community college kids, good place to go as well.
Yeah, and you mentioned the database there, Rob, and we did just go through. Kelly Gunner on our team went through and updated. So we do have sort of a spreadsheet of some of the universities and community colleges that, again, when we archive this uh, roundtable, that'll be linked in there, as well as Jared has. Can you post resources such as the Meat Locker YouTube channel, as you mentioned, university training? Yeah, we will provide some links to the Meat Locker and some of the YouTubes that Dr. Renfro has developed, because they're really, really great resources.
Yeah.
Um,
And feel free to email us. Our contact info will be at the end of the presentation here, but you email us and we can email you, but give us a little more information on what training you're looking for so that we can help you narrow the list down. There are a lot of opportunities out there, and a lot of them are scattered out through the year. So if you need a specific training today, we may have trouble finding something today, but we should be able to find something throughout the year that'll fit your needs. But we can send you a robust list of the various opportunities across the nation.
yep, absolutely. And Dr. Maddock, you mentioned, the folks going to work for JBS or Cargill. I think a lot of smaller processors say, "Well, gosh, I could hire somebody out of the line off of a JBS plant, or even a related. There's a grocery store next to me that they're doing away with their cutting program there and going to more to case ready. So I could grab their butcher. They can come right in and go to work for me." Talk about that a little bit. Yep.
Yeah. Well, and we talked with Greg too in this. That's you're probably better than nothing. So they have they have some knife sense. They've cut some meat, they've handled some stuff, they understand cold chain, they washing their hands, those so that's not a terrible place to start. We've had some people make that transition. If you're working a line at a big plant, you don't get cross-trained a whole lot. And so you're used to making the same cut 1,000 times a day. And so those folks don't necessarily come in fully formed as well. They're going to require a little time. But again, having that sense, they wore the equipment, they've been in the plant. That's a good place to start. And some of those retail guys, like Dr. Renfro said, that's where he got started. It's a nice place to start, but don't expect that they're going to drive a 1,600-pound beef in and have them get after it. When you're trying to do slaughter right away. But yeah, a nice place to look for people. Again, if they're tired of that sort of grind, nice thing about working a small plant can be a little different every day, right? You may do some slaughter on Monday and cutting on Tuesday and making hams on Thursday, and so that's kind of a nice selling point for those people who are willing to work in the meats industry, but are looking for something different than that big corporate job or that big plant job.
Yeah, and they pick up all that stuff up quicker too, and like I said, Rob said, I started out as a retail meat cutter, and when I went to University of Illinois, that's where I learned, carcasses and the slaughter end of it, and I picked it up really quick because I already knew how to use my knife. And one of the things that we have done, we the Kentucky Association of Meat Processors asked me to put together a video, and it basically just is, what is it like working in a meat plant, and especially the small, what we call the small county family owned ones. And I think Rob would agree with me, is there may be one day where you're freezing to death, and the next day you're working and you're sweating so much that you can't drink enough water to stay hydrated. And then there's other days you're going to look ridiculous because you got a hairnet on, a beard net on, and cooler coat and so on. But and it just the guys that have done this before, they're used to that. They know that they take to it a lot quicker, and your training time is going to be a lot shorter because their learning curve is a lot steeper than somebody just straight off the street.
You talk a lot about cutting meat, knife skills, and that, but when it comes to workforce training, what are some of the other um, areas that are important in having a good qualified workforce come into a smaller plant?
I will say this, and I've told my class this for many years. And my class is made up of animal science kids, food science students, and ag education majors. If they got out of this university in a college of agriculture and we didn't train them something, a class or part of a class or whatever on food safety, we've done them a great disservice. That is such an important aspect of our industry, which is weird because when I started cutting meat in the late 80s, food safety was washing your hands. And then in the early 90s, things took a drastic turn. And by the end of the 1990s, the focus was on food safety. Now, I'm not saying, and I think Dr. Maddock would agree, I'm not trying to make you a food microbiologist, but to know the names like Salmonella and E. coli and stuff like that, you need to know that. You need to understand the food safety programs and why we have HACCP and SSOP and GMPs. And now even another aspect is food defense. How do we protect our food supply and so on? Those are things that it's one thing to pick up a knife and cut meat. It's another thing to understand why you have to wash your hands, why you can't wear your frock and apron into the bathroom, why you have to wear a hairnet or a ball cap or something like that. You still have to know something about food safety.
Got a few more questions coming in here now. Michelle asked, what if you have no big plants around you and no plant period? The grocery store cutters don't cut either near you. You have to hire people with no experience. How do you get them training without putting a lot into them? New Mexico has nothing. So
Yeah,
I'll let you guys tackle that one.
that's a tough one. I'll let you in on I don't know if it's a secret or not, but the way I started was I started at a local grocery store. I was a cleanup boy. I ground hamburger, packaged meat and so on. And I worked my way up and eventually I became a meat cutter. And so, what a lot of folks in that situation will do, if you have an established meat cutter and you got a workforce working for you, start training those folks. And if you hire somebody new, bump somebody up. I don't know if promotion is the word I want to use there, but essentially it is, and that's how you keep doing that. We jokingly say around here, you got to have a bench, you got to have a bullpen that you can go to, and the more people you get trained that you already have, the easier that is.
And I would add too, there's a lot of online resources, Michelle, that we can send you and start off with these online resources that are very target specific for what you think they need starting out. And if you find out that they're worth investing or maybe sending off to some of these short courses that Dr. Renfro mentioned, you can invest a little bit of money at a time to send them for some in-person trainings. Or there's also people in our network that will come to you if you have a group of people that you want to do some mass training on. We can share some info on that too. So there's a few options for you there, but again, reach out and we'll get you a personalized answer and get you some direct resources.
And Dr. Renfro, you were talking about one of the videos that you're going to be making moving forward, and sort of the perspective of the camera,
Yeah.
and where that's going to be. Yeah, fill people in on that a bit.
Yeah, it was some videos I did in cooperation with the University of Maine, where I do a lot of work with Maine, and uh, we this really kind of cool. It'd be like a split screen where you can see me talking about it and working, but then there's an overhead camera where you can see what my hands are doing as well. So the videos you talked about that we've done down in the meats lab, I say down because I'm on the second floor and the meats lab's in the basement. That just has that one perspective of head on. This will have where you can actually see what my hands are doing. And hopefully we're going to get those coming out. Ironically, we filmed those during the pandemic, and you know how things happen. Life happens. The guy that's doing the editing that I work with, he was going through promotion, and now he's got a baby, and so next thing you know, I think Rob will tell you he knew me when I had dark hair, so that didn't seem like that was that long ago.
Yeah. So No, and that's as those come online and we know about them again, we will have those in our online toolkit, some links to those to help out as well. And I'm sure American Meat Science will have those in their meat lockers as well, so people can link into them. So, um,
Arthur's got another question here real quick, and this one will be a good one for both of our professors. Is the small regional processor industry going to be replaced by robotics?
We talk about that quite a bit, actually. I don't think so. Um, Now, robotics versus that. So it is a common theme if you go to if you join your state association of meat processors, the American or the national one, the AMP, right? They talk about this a lot over the last couple of years. People versus equipment. Um, you can have a small operation and you can paper wrap a lot of meat with a roll of paper and a tape dispenser, right? But your output isn't so great. Even the people get really good at it can only do so much. Or you can buy a roll stock machine that's $250,000 investment for a big one. By the time you get it installed, and you can do thousands of pounds of meat at a time. But my sense is for most of what we do, especially for local regional, is artisanal enough, it's hands-on enough that it's going to be a long time before an AI or a robot can replace that. I'm not saying Smithfield, Cargill, Tyson, they're working on the robots, right? They're trying to get people off the line for making the same cut 1,000 times a day. And they've been working for a long time, actually. They were the robots in plants 25 years ago. Uh, but I do not think that we are going to see that, especially for some of those margin products. I'm sure Dr. Renfro will tell you, you're not making a country ham. There's no the AI is not going to do that here for a while. So I'm
No.
not too concerned. I think there's margin, there's opportunity for businesses there that you're not going to be necessarily replaced by a machine anytime in the near future.
Yeah, I echo that. Yeah, ditto. It seems like the phrase I hear a lot from folks is what's old is new again. And so folks want that artisan type hands-on cutting, uh you get in it, and I not to open up another Pandora's box, but the lab produced meat, and you hear people say, "I don't want that," and I don't. It's a neat concept. I think the big processors, like Rob said, are going to probably look into that, invest in that, but the small process, I don't see that. I mean, they may buy a little bit of technology to make life a little bit easier, but not to where C3PO or R2D2 are running around the plant cutting meat. I just don't see that either.
yeah, I think that's where you have to have a cost benefit analysis for everything you bring in. There's
Yeah.
some automation that's going to save you a lot of time and improve your performance. But I just echo what both of you said is smaller processors, their key to success is differentiation. And it's not producing the same thing that Smithfield or XL produces. And so that's where that artisan part of it really, really comes in. So, yep.
Yeah, the next question, Jared had another one here come up and says, we are one of the highest paid processors in the Northeast, and we offer a training program for green employees, and retention is still a huge issue. Have you found what is most important to the workforce in this generation? This generation seems to not want to work, hustle, or invest in a career. They're not worth the money that we pay and leave shortly after they realize they can't get paid for minimum effort. Is there a training that has been developed that processors can use as a baseline to train this workforce, especially in a part of the country that this skill is not abundant? And I can admit to being a part of the problem, just can't figure out the solution to fix it.
I don't
One of
know about
our
Rob, but
good
if I knew the answer to that, I wouldn't be here. I'd be up on the beach somewhere.
I wasn't expecting we could have an answer to this one.
Yeah,
This is a tough one, Jared.
it's a tough
It
one.
is.
And David
um,
Zarling, who's part
Dave
of our,
Zarling, that's what I was
yeah,
going to say. Yep, go with that.
yeah, I love what he talks about is somebody said, what if I spend this time to train somebody and they leave? And he said, my response is, what if you don't train them and they decide to stay? And so you really have to weigh that out. One of the things that one of the processors I talked with recently, he says, I like to bring people in and just put them in my plant there for a few days to kind of see what's going on, and then have them go home and then call me up the next day and say, are they really interested in doing this? Because people think they know what goes on in a processing plant, but if you're not on the kill floor seeing that or walking around in the cold temperature, in all of that to know, is this really something what I want to do? So, yeah, Jared, when we get the answer to that, you'll be the first to know. Okay.
It may not be real soon, but it is a common problem, Jared. Just know that for sure.
Yeah, it is. It's just not in your area. It's everywhere.
Yeah, yeah. There are good ones out there, though. Keep that in mind. Next question come in says, I find some of the older owners are having very poor patience in training younger kids. They seem to expect an individual to not only to pick up cutting meat, but also be able to fix some equipment without asking permission. How do you change the manager's perception? I think this might be the opposite spectrum of the last question. But I think people do have to have patience. And
Yeah.
Rob or Greg, do you have something to add to this one?
Yeah, I've heard that before too, especially now when it costs so much to you have a grinder go down or a bandsaw go down, and then you're paying that guy 2 hours to leave his house to drive to your plant, and then 2 hours for him to get back home. So you get 4 hours, you're paying him, and you didn't do anything. That's a huge issue. And you're right, patience. You just have to remind yourself that you yourself didn't pick this up overnight, and it's going to take those folks time to do that as well.
I don't think I have anything to add to that other than it's uh, if they are management and they own part of the facility or the business, they're really hurting themselves. Uh, Jump in on that too. I think in finding some people, a nice way, and I don't want to run out of time before I said this, is if you have a 4-H or an FFA group, chapter or club close by, interfacing with those guys, that you'd be surprised. Not maybe you wouldn't be surprised. The meat processing units in high school egg programs are some of the most popular ones they have. Kids love that, and it's a nice way to find your initial person who might think that's okay.
Yeah.
And so I always encourage local region processors interface with your local high schools, your local egg programs, your local extension, and find some of those guys, because those high school kids, they do enjoy this quite a bit, and it may be a good entryway to find the. You may start with 40 that are in the class, you can get two that actually want to work in the facility. But that's just I throw that out there as a pretty good place to start to try and find people.
I agree.
Ben is asking, have you seen success with direct hands-on training in small plants by a training consultant?
A little bit. Can I say that? Because I've probably done a few of those where you show up and help a guy for a little bit. Um, yes, it gets them along. It depends on the person as well. We've actually had a few requests throughout my career. Can I come in and work in the meat lab for a couple weeks and learn some stuff? And we've been able to accommodate that, at least at NDSU now. I'm not sure every university would do that to be a non-employee there. You have to have something set up, but you'd have to get them a credit or something like that. But yeah, if you can find them. Now it depends on what they're going to charge you. If somebody's going to charge you $1,500 a day to come show somebody how to cut meat, it may be worth it if you can hold on to people. But there's a few of us around the country that'll do that. So it's not a terrible idea, especially if you're a place where you can't find any other training.
And
Yeah.
Ben, I would add too that there's a lot of targeted training, and there's in-person HACCP training that you can do with a group of people. I've had people that do in-person plant maintenance training where they're actually going through your equipment to make sure that your people understand the parts and pieces that are just need to be serviced. They need to be checked. There's just so many different things in a plant that you can be trained on. And I think you have to look at what your end goals are. Are you going to bring somebody in that's going to teach them everything from the front door to the back door? Probably not. But targeted training, it could be muscle identification, it could be knife skills, it could be all kinds of different things. But we have seen some success in the in-person training. So again, reach out if you have some targeted needs and you're looking for some references. We'll try to help get you some.
Yep. Yeah, and Chris Pam she got a question here, and then she added on to it down below, but and it kind of follows along on the robotics. But she said, how can robotics enhance workforce in some way rather than just replacing people?
It makes some jobs easier. Um,
Yeah.
I see some people in some small plants now with big beef carcasses, right? Beef have got big, or they're still
Yeah.
dropping quarters and lugging them across and throw them on a table. Where that's not even robotics, just buying a hoist, right? Spending some money on those sorts of things. Where people uh, things make easier, having the proper equipment to pull carcasses apart, where you can reduce some of that repetitive motion things. You can make things easier on people. Um, even I would say moderate sized retails in terms of retail cutting, there's a lot of robotics out there. Even though I think people, I kind of enjoy cutting steaks, but I guess if I had to do it for 8 hours or 10 hours a day, there's some pretty inexpensive technology that'll cut your strips and your ribeyes and your things like that, and get them retail packaged. So there
Yeah.
is certainly some things there where if you're making life easier for people, especially from a physical or a mental stimulation thing, that you could look at incorporate and spend some money on, you probably keep some more people around. I see that from time to time.
I agree.
A lot of
I've seen that with when we went through the pandemic, and a lot of states did this. I know we did here in the bluegrass is invest in technology to help streamline things. And the two spots you'd see it is, well, I got 5 people packaging. Well, roll stock, yeah, it may be like Rob said, $250,000, but then all of a sudden, a year later, it's paid for itself because now you've got one person doing your packaging rather than 4 or 5. And stuffers, vacuum stuffers, yeah, they're $25,000-$30,000 investment. And I'll never forget one time I told the guy, I said, you need a vacuum stuffer to do your ground beef. He says, oh, those things are too expensive. Well, then he comes up to Meat Lab and he saw our guys, do 350 pounds of ground beef and have it packaged and ready and in the freezer in 15 minutes. And he's like, maybe we do need one of those. So,
Yep.
That was one of the exact examples. We've seen people add a portioner stuffer and just speed up that process. When you go to some of the older plants with no technology and they're still pinching off,
yeah.
trying to pinch off 1 pounds of ground beef for a small pack, it really drives you nuts when you go into the plants that haven't seen that technology yet. But there's palletizers, there's pallet wrappers. Again, you can get detailed on specific things that can be beneficial in a small plant.
And
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 that's why
I
it's
would say,
important.
yeah, that's why, take a look at your whole workflow, your product flow through your plant, and where is the pinch point?
Yeah.
Do I have employees standing around, because the process is slow here? Is that where we need to invest some money to create that smoother product flow through the plant? So,
Yeah.
yep.
And I was going to say, this is why it's important to be involved in your local meat processor associations, your state processor associations, and AMP, American Association of Meat Processors, that trade show. I mean, when I was doing that with the state, during the pandemic, I'd say, well, you need, what you said, vacuum stuffer or roll stock. Some of these guys had absolutely no idea what I was talking about.
Yeah, Andrew has another question here for us. And what is the best source for training videos and material on GMPs, safety, sanitation, and other facets of the meat food industry? I have found some useful material on the AMP website and YouTube. What are your suggestions to source this info for my team?
Go ahead, Rob.
Universities, well, Meat Locker, we try to link to all the universities' resources. A lot of
Yeah.
depending where you're at, it doesn't matter. You don't have to be in, if you're in Texas, you don't have to use Texas A&M stuff, or Michigan State. There's a lot of pretty good stuff out there. AMP's good. If you join AMP as a member, then you get behind the paywall, and then you really get in. AMP membership is such a value. You need to get to the access to their stuff. I mean, full, basically almost plug and play. Plus, you get access to their consultants. So if you're a small processor, you're going to throw that plug in there. Niche meat processors, NPAN, another great site. So just you might have to do a little digging. Most of the stuff that's out there is pretty good, but if you lean into the university, the associations, and the nonprofits, you'll find your stuff. What you don't do the first hit the first Google link you find where they want to direct you to somebody where it's a pay to play sort of thing outside of those memberships. So that's where I would suggest start. And then that's what we do, and I mean especially you get a little stump, then you get a hold of the MPPTA, it's just Flower Hill and me and NPAN and AMP, and we'll get you set up. That's the next step.
That was my suggestion. Send us an email. We'll bombard you with links to check out, and then if we don't find the right one, we'll keep trying for you.
Yeah.
Michelle has another question here and I think following up on the one we had before. The fast food or base that they can get other jobs starting at 15 or 16 an hour. We have taken employees to AMP and to Iowa short courses that most don't stay past a year, mostly after game season. They expect 18 to $20 an hour because the work is too hard, and paying flights and classes and hotel for that is a lot of money. An employee that then thinks once I pay for those classes, they need bumped up per hour. Maybe I'm just frustrated with our workforce in my area. I'm not sure. I would take an intern from a college in a heartbeat. At least they have interest in the field. But yeah, again, don't know that we have an immediate solution to the issue. Just know, Michelle, it's everywhere. It's something that we do have to deal with, but it's also part of the business. It's not something that is just you facing this. It's nationwide, so it is frustrating,
And
but you're not alone.
and that's why this isn't the first roundtable we've done on workforce development. I don't think it'll be the last. This is an ongoing challenge. Go ahead, Rob. Yeah.
There's two things. One is the idea of the wage. I get into large plants, not on a fairly regular basis, different projects. And there's a sign out there in front of Tyson, Dakota City. They're starting at $22 an hour plus shift differential plus benefits. Okay. That's for a guy standing on a line. Doesn't even have to have a high school diploma. They get, have be legal to work here and show up, and it's $22 an hour. They'll do shift differential. The bottom line and the unfortunate part about that is if you can't pay what the prevailing wage or better is in your area, you need to evaluate your business because you need to be able to charge enough for your product or your service on the back end to cover that. And that's an unfortunate thing. Like I said, finding people in Fargo, North Dakota, the high school kids at Dairy Queen make $17 an hour. Um, where are they going to work meat? They really want to work in a meat shop for less than that. So it's a tough one. I agree, but
Yep.
you sometimes you got to bake that into your books, and you need to raise your prices on the backside to cover those higher input costs.
No, and that ties into the question from the next person here of finding and retaining employees when your plant is competing with the mining and oil industry, which can pay more than you can. Literally, last year I was down. There was a processor down in Arizona that was wanting to had upgraded their plant to become USDA inspected, but literally when I went down and visited them, they are right across the road from a big open pit copper mine that's paying $35 an hour for starting. And so they said, until we can solve that, we're just going to stay small and focus because we can't factor that in. So it's a tough one. Yep.
Arthur has another one here. Are you aware of any small regional processors that offer a employee equity program, maybe to help keep turnover rates reasonable and quality up?
I've heard of some, not a whole lot, and it kind of goes back to the other thing we were talking about. It's kind of hard to do that when you got such a high turnover. This business, it can be a high turnover, and so it's difficult to have any kind of profit sharing or any type of those programs that she was mentioning.
If you're going to push this AMP or you're still their association, Oftentimes there are sessions at some of those meetings. They talk about how to keep employees. There's things like weekly paychecks. If you're paying every 2 weeks, pay on Thursday every week.
Hmm.
And they people say that, and suddenly they get their retention went up 10%.
Yeah.
There's things you can do on that. Obviously, more work on your end if you're the owner or the manager. But there was they were paying out. I think I forget who it was. Maybe someone in Minnesota. They were paying weekly bonus, or it actually was every 2 weeks based on production. So okay, we did X number of pounds or business last week, I think it was a week delayed, and those guys were getting, anywhere from dozens to hundreds of dollars extra, uh, based on actual, sales. So some of those things that you can work into, and again, if you go in and you attend some of those conferences, you may get some of these tips and trips or tricks and tips, but the other is to do a little work, talk to your other small business people, because they're in the same place, whether they're working at a shop or a farm or a meat processing facility, or they're a plumber, or they're framing houses. It's the same all over. So what are they doing to keep their guys and employees there and happy? Use some of the same things.
All good points. Raquel has a comment here for us, and USDA NIFA opened funding yesterday for the Agriculture and Food Research Initiative, Education and Workforce Development. So for those of you interested in maybe helping improve workforce development, there are some grants available. So take a look at that. Raquel added that for us. And then Carlene down in Virgin Islands, she's got. Do you guys have a list of people or organizations that provide in-person training, such as hands-on machinery maintenance? And yet, yes, we do, Carlene. So if you'll reach out, we'll want to look at the different pieces of equipment you have and find the right person. But we can definitely help you with that. Andrew says thank you. And then the next question here is, thanks for the webinar. Are there certain benefits besides health and 401 that employers can provide to their workers that support retention? A lot of trainers will say it's the environment that will help keep workers, but with meat processing, I don't know that the environment is enough. Examples could be monthly worker family meat roast, first aid, CPR training, monthly chair massage therapist. Is there any other data that says these are beneficial? And I think Rob hit on some of these. We've seen some weekly attendance bonuses, production bonuses, all kinds of things. But I'll let these guys add, their thoughts on it.
Meat, I think, is always a good one. Like I said, the having the employee store, if you got enough or it's at a discount, that goes a ways. And I think that's not necessarily expectation, but it's common enough that I would certainly we're lean into that one a little bit as well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Next question from Ryan, and maybe it's sharing a thought here. Focusing on the ideal employee group may be the wrong answer. For instance, looking for a male between the ages of 20 to 40 might not work. So maybe looking for a 35-year-old female with 3 kids in school would be a better fit. Also, being flexible enough to change your hours to fit your employees' needs is something to consider. Great thought, Ryan. Yeah, looking at different demographics is an excellent thing to look at.
And I totally agree, because again, you talk about different generations. I mean, the realities of being a young adult these days are different than they were when 100 years ago when I was young. So trying to adapt is really important moving forward.
Jennifer has one for us here. Do you have any thoughts on how to get more quality individuals excited to work in a small meat processing industry? We have brought in the 4-H and FFA groups, did tours and learning. We can get part-time help from some, but none that want to stay long-term after high school.
Kind of goes back to the original one. If we knew the answer to that one, it is tough, and I think you're right. The tours for FFA, 4-H, and so on. They may not immediately pan out for you, but eventually there'll be some kids that do that. We do a lot of tours here for our meats lab, And one of the things I ask kids, how many of you are going to go to school? And I'm hearing more and more of folks wanting to go into trade schools. I think, and I'd love to hear Rob's opinion on this as well. I kind of think of education and as a pendulum where when Rob and I were growing up, our parents told us you had to have an education to make a good living, and it's that pendulum is swinging over here to education. Now it seems like it's swung over to the trades, to where you can have a good life, you can make a good living by learning a trade, and I think that's where. That's why we're here, because now the kids are more interested. I shouldn't say more and more kids are being interested in learning a trade, and meat cutting definitely is a trade. And so I think the pendulum from that standpoint have swung over to the trades, and I think more and more kids are going to be interested in that. And I always tell folks, I'll never forget one time I was at a lecture that Don Tyson was the speaker. And your history. Don Tyson is the founder of Tyson Foods. The one of the world's largest food purveyors in the world. But he said, as long as people are hungry, we've got a job. So, in the meats industry, foods industry, there's. I hesitate to say we're recession proof, but my goodness, during the Depression, during recessions, boy, they were still wanting kids with foods background, kids with meats backgrounds, and so on. So there's a little bit of job security in that.
Great points.
And one of the things I think too is when we're talking about training people for as meat cutters or just to be in a plant, your future isn't always going to be just in a meat plant. There's such a growth right now in the culinary area for nose to tail cooking and chefs that are actually know how to break down a carcass and the like. So, they're getting a good training does open some doors. But
Yeah. Heidi added a comment here too, we're a startup producer and worker-owned cooperative. Our employees will earn patronage refunds and equity positions as members. So another good benefit there. So thanks for sharing, Heidi.
and Heidi, I would love to have you email me because I'd like to continue a conversation with you on that.
Next question here is on split saw technology. Have you seen small plants incorporate an automated version?
I have not seen that technology. I wouldn't even begin to know how much that would cost for just a carcass splitter. I assume that's what she's talking about. Um, Man, those things. I mean, if you're looking for the robot that does it, that'd be fairly pricey. But if you're looking like the elevator system where you have the splitting saw in the elevator and the guy rides up and down, that's a different story there. But the ones where the splitters, the robot, it goes by and the robot does that. I've not ever heard of anybody, smaller than one of the big boys doing that kind of stuff or purchasing those things.
Yeah, Rob, have you?
My guess is that's coming from on a beef split. They're having some trouble. They're getting a lot of missed splits. Upgrade your technology. Make sure you have a rail splitter, and then put in that. If you put that lift in there, where you can line up the saw and just ride the lift down. Even I can split beef fairly confidently with those. But when I'm standing on the ground with a counterweight and that carcass gets to swing a little bit, yeah, I've wrecked a few T-bones in my life doing that too.
Yeah,
But so the
amen.
technology is if you can put the lift in, that'll get you there. But the robot one, I think those even the big guys they've taken them in and out because that technology is it's probably mature, but it'd be pretty spendy because of the cameras and the AI that go into it.
Yeah, and you said
So
something, Rob, that kind of clicked in my head. If you're talking about splitting beef carcasses, the bandsaw type splitters work best. If you got the one with the big thick blade that just, you know, if you're in the right spot, it's not cutting. You got the wrong tool. You need to invest in something that's actually going to cut.
Yeah, sauce.
this we're coming up to the time here, so
Mhm.
we'll go ahead and take one more question. But those of you that have questions, go ahead and type them in there because we'll pass those along after we get done today and get you those answers. So
Yeah. A lot of great comments here, but yeah, well, the last comment here is most of my employees are women. Do you know any program that could offer more benefits for them? Also, do you know of any program where I can send some of my employees for maintenance training? And I'll answer yes. Send us a specific email and we will get you some very specific training opportunities. But also, Greg or Rob, if you've got any comments on that, please share those as well.
Yeah.
Yep. So I think we're out of time here. I'll have Nikki, she'll put up a slide that has the contact information for Dr. Maddock and Dr. Renfro, as well as Chris and myself. Be sure and get a hold of any of us with questions moving forward. We're here to help you. And again, we will have a list of the training schools that we have in our database, as well as I'll pester Dr. Renfro and Dr. Maddock for links to any of the resources that they have that we'll have with our archived version of this in our online toolkit. So, Chris, go ahead and wrap us up here.
Thank you all for joining us. We have many more planned after this, so stay tuned to the Flower Hill newsletter for information on our next roundtables. We've got some really good ones coming up here over the next several weeks.
Yeah, seeing as how the questions started coming in about 8 minutes into this session, I think we'll be back with this topic here because this is so important. So thank you all for being with us today, and have a great day. Take care.
Thanks.